Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today is Advent day number 15, and for this video I'm going to be showing you all the watercolour supplies that I am currently using. So firstly I'm going to talk to you about the type of paper that I use. So for my watercolour drawings I use the Arches Hotpress watercolour paper, and I like to use this paper because it's really thick. This is really good because when you're using watercolours sometimes the paper tends to buckle and warp a bit, especially when you're using a lot of water, but as you can see this paper is so thick that it really prevents the paper from warping at all, which is really good. And if it does warp a bit then it's really easy to flatten it back out with this paper. The only downfall with this paper is that it can be a bit expensive. So for one sheet that is 22 by 30 inches it comes out for me at about £10 per sheet, but it is really good quality. The next supply is the type of pencil that I use to sketch out my drawings. So I'm currently using the Pentel 0.5mm mechanical pencil, and mechanical pencils are great because they have a really fine lead, and it also means that you don't have to sharpen them at all, which means there's no wastage of pencil, so they last a really long time. Once I've done that, I tape the paper down using the Scotch Magic Tape, and this gives the drawing a nice border, and it also is really good at preventing the paper from buckling from all the watercolour that you're using. I tend to buy this tape in bulk, so I buy it in a box of 14 rolls of the tape, which works out to be a lot cheaper in the long run. One of my favourite materials to use for watercolour paintings is my masking fluid. So I use the Daler and Rowney masking fluid, and what masking fluid is you apply it on certain parts of the drawing that you don't want to get any watercolour on, that you want to remain clean, and then it dries to form a latex, which once you've done your watercolour you can just peel off and it will reveal the nice paper without any watercolour on it at all. So to do this you use some old paintbrushes because it clogs up the paintbrushes a lot, so don't use your new paintbrushes or your really expensive ones. The actual paintbrushes I use for my watercolour drawings are the Daler and Rowney Aquafine range, and I got them in a range of sizes. So what I love about these paintbrushes is that they are really soft. I tend to use the larger paintbrushes to do more of the background work, and then with the finer paintbrushes I use them for a lot more of the detail work, for example to do features of the face and stuff like that. Next I'm going to talk to you about the actual watercolour paint that I'm using. So I have got the 20 set palette of the Windsor and Newton professional range of watercolours. So it came with 20 in the set, and what's really nice about these is that you can buy each of the colours individually. So as you can see I bought the 3 in the middle individually because I wanted a few extra pink shades, and you've also got room along the middle to add some more extra ones if you want. These watercolours are quite expensive, and that's because they're very light fast, which means the painting won't fade, so they're such good quality. So when I'm using this watercolour paint I tend to take the palette out of the tin and just put it alongside the drawing. So these watercolours might be a bit expensive if you're a beginner, but they do have a lower cost range called the common watercolours, which are good if you're a beginner. As you may have seen on my channel I like to do a lot of splatter effects with my watercolours, so I tend to use a straw and I blow through it to create some really nice splatter effects. The next item that I'm just going to show you is just the cup that I use to hold my water in. So when you want something to hold your water in, it can be anything. I tend not to use your expensive drinking glasses as they'll get wrecked. So any cheap cup or any cheap old jar that you've used to add food in, you can wash that out, and that's really nice just to put some water in to clean out your brushes. So one of the main tools that I use to blend out my watercolours is called the Pentel water brush pen, and this is really good because it has really smooth bristles, and so can be used to get some really nice smooth gradiated colour changes. So what happens is you put water into the tube, and then as you're blending the water is released into the bristles, making it easier to fade out those colours. A really cheap tool that you can have that gives great results is just a toothbrush, and this is also really nice to get a nice splattered effect. So I use this as well as the straw to create some more splattered effects in the background. A toothbrush gives more of like a spray result, whereas the straw is used to blow the watercolours around. A lot of the time when I'm doing watercolour backgrounds, at the end I like to create some highlights, and to do this I use the white gouache by Windsor and Newton. So I use the permanent white of this, and I use it to tap on some white dots onto the background quite a lot. I also use it sometimes to create highlights, so for example highlights in the eyes. To create the drop effect in the background I use a paintbrush, and I apply the paint just to the paintbrush and tap that on, making little drops of the paint fall off. And I don't use the paint straight from the bottle, I do mix it in with a bit of water to thin the mixture down a bit. Okay, so it's very rare that I use watercolour just on its own. I tend to always use it with colour pencils. So the colour pencils that I use alongside the watercolours are first the Faber Castell Polychromos. These pencils are really good at going straight over the top of the watercolours, and I have the 120 set of them. So the other type of colour pencils that I love to use are the Caran Luminance colour pencils. I tend to use these in any of the portraits that I'm doing as well with the watercolours. For example, this portrait I did called Illustrious Death, the girl I did with coloured pencils and the background I did with the watercolours. And as well with this one of Rosetta, I did her all in coloured pencil and I did the background with watercolour. So I like to combine these two mediums together. And what's really good is the coloured pencils work really well on the watercolour paper as well. So, to do the final highlights in the drawing, I use two types of gel pens. First, I can use the Uniball Signo gel pen or the Sakura Jelly Roll gel pen, and I like to use both of them, and I just have two different types. Okay, so that's all the watercolour supplies that I use. I hope you enjoyed that video and I hope you found it helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll leave the links to my social media sites in the description below. If you're new to my channel, feel free to subscribe so that you don't miss out on my future videos. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching and I'll see you tomorrow.